Hey coaches, today we're going to begin looking at co-creating the coaching relationship. This is a combination of two core competencies from the International Coach Federation, which we've looked at before, which are building trust and intimacy and coaching presence. Putting these two things together, when a coach does these competencies, observes these competencies, and demonstrates them well in a session, it builds the relationship. And a key part of that, which we're going to be looking at with this video, is how to demonstrate that the coach's attention is not on the coach, but rather on the client. Let's get started by looking at some ways a coach can be demonstrating that the coach's attention is a little bit more internal, a little bit more focused on themselves as the coach. Now, the first way, in some ways, the simplest thing to adjust even out of this list is asking quite a few informational based questions. Informational questions are those questions that do not move the client forward. Instead, they just give information to the coach. When a coach asks about when the meeting is, how much salary this person wants, what function their peer plays within like what department their peer works in, all of these questions are knowledge that the client has. We can still ask questions around those topics. How urgent is the meeting? What impact does the increase in salary have in the desire for promotion? And how has collaboration worked before with this peer and their team? Those are more exploratory questions that do get a little bit at what's the information, but it's more focused on the client and the client growing around those topics. So avoiding information-based questions as much as we can is a great way to move away from demonstrating attention just on the coach. Now, the next one is something that we're going to look at with another session or another video here, and that's explaining questions. And over explaining of the questions we were asking, setting this up, giving them a sense of why am I going to be asking this, and then asking the question, and then asking it in a different way, and then trying to correct the second one. And all of this is saying, I'm a little bit more worried about me and my performance as coach and how things are going than just being focused on you as the client. We want to step away from that sense of self-correction in the session, or I should say self-criticism. Self-correction can be done well as we step back and recover, but when we're overly critiquing our performance to where it's obvious to the client we're struggling, then the focus is really internal and there's less safety and relationship and trust and intimacy with the client. Another thing that can get in the way of the coach demonstrating great connection and attention on the client is not acknowledging the client's work in the session and not acknowledging the use of their language, what they are contributing to the session. If every question, an observation, and contribution from the coach is from the coach as the source, these are template questions. This is my tool. This is the way I would phrase what you're saying. This is a metaphor that I'm going to contribute here. If everything from the coach is from the coach, like it's our language and our work as coach, then we are truly not focusing on the work of the client. And finally, when a coach is extra focused on being the expert, who is being paid to solve the problem? The coach is not the one being paid to solve the problem. A consultant would actually be paid to solve the problem, but in the exchange, the coach is being paid to help the client solve the problem. So it's this weird exchange, what happens in a coaching relationship, where the client is paying someone else to help the client do the work of problem solving. So in a way, they're paying themselves to do that work of problem solving. And the coach is there to prompt, to challenge, to acknowledge work, to ask questions that dig at the roots and dig at the breadth of where we could take an idea or what's needed here, or what's most important to the individual. We're along for the ride. We're not the expert on this client's life and what solutions they ought to pursue. Instead, we are the expert on the conversational process that is coaching. And if we can use that process well, then we are focusing more on the client's contributions, because the best language, the best movements in the session, the best things that can happen in the session are always based on what the client has said, contributed, the direction they've provided, the metaphor, the figurative language that they have used in the session. That becomes the word bank and the thought bank of the coach. And when the coach is less focused on how can I solve this and more focused on how can I use this wonderful language and contributions from my client, then of course we are moving away from focusing on me, focusing on them as the client. Now, let's focus on actively or proactively focusing attention on the client. The first one is acknowledging the work of the client. When the client has demonstrated a good level of vulnerability, they have shared something deep, they've used really meaningful language, they have solved their problem, they have finally made that decision, they followed through on their action. Whatever it might be, we want to be there with an acknowledgement, maybe a sense of gratitude, and helping them make the most of that moment of their greatness. Wow. I'm just sitting back and enjoying how much you've done here. I'm really impressed by your courage, for one, and your creativity, and how you came up with that solution. For whatever it's worth, great job. Really. Thank you for letting me coach you through that. This is a way to say, client, you're the star of the show, and I get to watch your performance. I get to be here to encourage you, to challenge you, to be your audience, but you are the performer. This greatly demonstrates attention on the client. Another way to demonstrate attention on the client is to use observations and questions that are truly based on what's happening right here in the session. Again, as we are moving outside of that first quarter of coaching, now we're firmly in the second quarter of coach training here in this program. We're moving away from the templates, the basics, the questions that are from lists. Instead, we are wanting to focus more on that coaching algebra. And the best variable to build a question, a powerful question, is going to be some sort of contribution from the client. When the coach takes whatever the client has said, observes it, or whatever the client has done or demonstrated in the session, observes it, whatever the client has said, and brings that into a coaching question, that says, I'm here, I'm present, I heard you, I see you, I'm curious for you, what all this means to you. The coach is there as witness for the client. So make sure, as coach, you leverage what you are witnessing in your powerful questions and your observations. Another basic is to make eye contact. When we don't make eye contact and we're overly typing our notes, we're taking, we're jotting down too many notes, we're thinking a little bit too much about what that next question is, then there's a lack of connection with that individual we're coaching. We want to make sure that we are making that eye contact and creating this personal connection between ourselves and this brilliant individual we are supporting. And finally, something that we've looked at before, but a great way a coach can demonstrate connection and attention on the client is to believe, truly believe, and demonstrate the belief that the client can direct the conversation. It's not only in the agenda setting, but in regularly checking in on the direction of the session. Now, it doesn't have to always be the same phrase. In fact, we want to move away from the same phrasing of where should we go next? Where should we go next? Where should we go next? But in so many words, we want to defer to them and to focus on their sense of what they need most to move themselves forward in solving the problem. We can always contribute as they need, as they come back to us and say, I don't know where to go next. What do you think? Well, we can offer an option. We can offer a few options. We can prompt them with a question based on our own intuition or observation. But start with them. Every generally 4 or 5 questions, defer. How close are we to what you wanted by the end of the session? Where are we right now? Where should we go next in the session? How close are we to wrapping up? All of these questions help defer to the client, help them make decisions about where do I go next.